Welcome to episode 334 of the Shared Security Podcast. I'm your host, Tom Eston, joined by my always amazing co-hosts, Scott Wright and Kevin Johnson. Yes.
Every single time you do the 3, 2, 1, I want to go just as you get to the end to mess with your intro. And
you could do that.
The intrusive thoughts are just incredible.
Yes. But wait, there's more. My intro is not over yet.
Oh, dang it. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I know. I was trying something different.
You really did screw it up, Kevin.
I know.
Man.
Well, we have two hot topics to discuss today. The first one, we're going to examine the ongoing legal battle between Citizen Lab and the infamous Israeli spyware company called NSO Group. So despite the NSO Group's efforts to access Citizen Lab's documents, courts have consistently blocked these attempts to protect victim privacy and prevent further harassment. So we'll have an interesting discussion about that. And then Scott's going to talk to us in our Aware Much segment about Apple's latest move to prioritize user privacy with its new AI features, which were just announced yesterday at their big developer conference. And they're setting a lot of that to be opt-in by default. So we're going to talk about what that means and how this is becoming a bigger trend with tech giants. Either it's opt-in or it's opt-out, or you don't get a choice at all. So good times.
Yeah, I don't think we should call NSO infamous because...
Yeah, let's not.
Infamous sounds like they're that cool... villain type, but we should admire them.
I mean, they could be a villain.
We
could say they're a villain.
In my opinion, they're disgusting.
Or that. Yes, we could go there.
The disgusting organization, NSO, the organization that should be pissed on and nuked forever. The organization that is evil in the best and worst kind of context and in no way reasonable or should exist. I believe personally that every single person that is involved in NSO, knowingly involved in NSO, should be set on fire. We should wait until they're in excruciating pain. We should then put them out, heal them once they are feeling better and kind of blanked out the pain and anguish of that fire. We should set them on fire again. And we should do this repeatedly until we just get bored.
And if you're looking for a definition of the word insight, you could look it up in the dictionary. You'd see a little video of Kevin there.
Yeah. Tell us how you really feel, Kevin.
God, this is a disgusting organization. Sorry.
So let's get to the bottom of this, right?
Yeah, let's actually talk about the article.
We all agree NSO is a horrible group, but let me just frame the context. Right? Citizen Lab, they do a lot of great investigative research. Yes. They are, in fact, Canadian. Isn't that right, Scott?
Yes.
Yes. Go Canada.
University of Toronto. Yes.
Woo, Canada.
That's right. And they have exposed a lot of the things that NSO and other groups have done to, tracking journalists, human rights activists. I mean, there's so much good research that they have done, and they've obviously targeted Pegasus, which is the software that NSO Group sells to nation states to target people, the aforementioned people that I said. So the U.S., in fact, has banned NSO Group. Like, they blacklisted them for selling, you can't buy, the government or anybody can't buy NSO Group software. Like, that's a pretty big deal, right? To blacklist an entire company. But they are continuing to try to get information out of Citizen Lab and going to court over this. And that's kind of what this latest news is about, the multiple lawsuits that NSO Group is trying to do. And thankfully, judges are basically denying these requests.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah, it's quite interesting, actually, when you know the history. I don't know all the history, but I just remember first hearing about it. There was a Darknet Diaries episode in 2021 called The Spy. And it was about a guy named Igor, who was a private investigator detective. And he was hired by the Black Cube group, sort of as a subcontractor, right, to actually spy on John Scott Railton, who is a researcher for Citizen Lab. And the story in that Darknet Diary episode is hilarious. It's actually really funny how it all comes about, because Igor kind of flipped and told the whole story, and it was funny. But just to realize that that relationship or that interest goes back that far, and the NSO Group is talking about how good they are for exposing terrorists or fighting terrorists and criminals, when really most of their stuff is being used for oppression and things like that. And so this story, the reason we're bringing it up is that it really shows that NSO Group is more interested in the dirt on the people that have dirt on them than on fighting the terrorists and the criminals.
Yeah, in fact, I think they approach like the U.S. and Israeli government and said, hey, because of this Hamas, this is around October 7th.
Yeah, last year.
They're like, you should be purchasing our software to target Hamas. And like,
nice try.
Yeah, right. I mean, use a conflict to sell more spyware when in fact, like Citizens Labs research is showing how, they are targeting, like their software can target like anybody with enough money. It's very, very concerning. So
if I may throw something in, this is actually a very common technique of bullying organizations via the court systems, right? To get access to stuff that you're going to use for other means, right? And that's what it appears NSO is doing, right? They've repeatedly asked for this information. Citizen Lab has said no. Other courts have said no. And it's just this constant bullying of activists and whatever. And I'm not, I'm not going to take a side in the, whether Citizens Lab is good or bad or whatever. Okay, I will take a side. They're excellent. But this model of we can't have this, so we're going to get a judge to tell us we can have it. Because if I can just convince a judge I get it, that's disgusting. And again, it goes back to the entire thing about this organization. I am really impressed that so far, for the majority of this, the courts have sided with what I think is the right stance. No, right?
Yeah.
Like that isn't necessary for this case. That isn't right. Like we see too often, both in Canada and the U.S., which is the two I pay attention to, and I'm aware there's others. I'm just saying that courts, once technology is in scope or once technology is the conversation, courts don't know where to fall down. So they tend to fall down on getting more information revealed, which is quite often bad.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, interesting developments. So we will definitely keep a close eye on that. And I mean, we've talked about Citizen Labs research many, many times in the past on this podcast because it is so good. And they do a great job. So definitely one organization we support and we encourage others to support as well. All right. Well, we have Kevin here. So I think it is time for Kevin's favorite segment. Are you ready?
I'm ready. I'm already
We call this segment Aware Much?
Yes, Tom, it's time to lift the veil of uncertain cognizance that shrouds our perception.
No.
Or,
that was a good.
Wow.
Did ChatGPT write that?
I won't comment on that. But
I
here's
love
something that wasn't written by AI. Imagine Sir Isaac Newton sitting under a tree one evening in 1666 and being visited by a nerd from the future telling him that in 2024, there will be something called Apple Intelligence. I wonder how that would have changed his theory of gravitation.
My Apple is intelligent? What?
Oh, man.
In any case, Apple Intelligence is here. You've been waiting for it, especially Kevin.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And it's the Android phone. Yes.
Yeah, it is it. But of course, Apple had to come out with an AI play, and it's actually not, at this point, equivalent to ChatGPT. It's got features that will be augmented with AI capabilities, things like writing tools, image generation, prioritization of notifications. And a highlighted feature of AI, or Apple Intelligence, will be personalization with privacy as a priority, as Tom mentioned. Now, that sounds challenging, but something that's kind of interesting is they're apparently opting in users by default, and that could be causing some privacy issues in itself. What do you guys think?
Well, I think it's interesting that, how do you get away from it, right? Like,
Yeah.
I think a lot of companies, these tech companies think that, well, these are just things that you want. And Apple, for as one company, they have, I'll give them some credit. They successfully predicted that everybody would want an iPhone or the smartphone, right? They basically brought that to market.
Yeah.
And so they have a trend of, and they're always like the last ones to come to market with whatever new anything, right? Like AI. They're kind of like the last big tech company to, because everyone's been asking like, why doesn't Siri have AI? Like, why does it still pull up Google results and stupid stuff like that? Well, I think they do their best to try to perfect it, and they learn from a lot of the mistakes that others have made. But I understand their approach of like, well, we're doing it all on the device. It's the same argument that we see Microsoft making with Recall, which, by the way, was
Go to the last episode for more information.
Probably our most popular episode ever on YouTube. I know, Kevin, you missed last week, but that episode has gone viral because people are so angry at Microsoft for the way that they've rolled out Recall. And I know there's been some recent news where they've kind of, based on good research from a lot of security researchers and people that have been, commenting and saying and testing it, saying this is bad, guys. The way you've implemented it is bad. I feel that Apple has tried to learn from that. And while some things are going to be opt-in, right? I don't know. It's time will tell, I think, is my take on it. What do you think, Kevin?
I don't know that I
Speechless.
agree.
Yeah?
The reason I say that is we see too often where companies don't learn from the past. I think what we're going to see is more of the larger companies will be opt-in.
Yeah.
But, I mean, a good example of this, in my mind, is the uproar about Adobe that just happened because of their terms of service, right? They just kind of subtly released terms of service. As a matter of fact, it was released months ago. It was just noticed recently that they're now, according to what people are claiming, that they're going to train their AI on everybody's private pictures that they drew and everything else like that. And Adobe, of course, has come out and said, no, of course we're not. It's like, but that's what it says. And we're going to see this type of misstep time and time and time again. And so I think that it's good to see that Apple is paying attention, which is not common for Apple necessarily, right?
Sure.
Apple very often releases stuff and then reacts to the uproar, at least in my opinion. But I'd like to see it. I'd like, we've talked about this a million times. I don't expect privacy, but I would like it.
Yeah. There's a confusing part in a couple of the articles I've read because I don't know who they're quoting, but it says the feature will be opt-in by default. And to me, that's actually a contradictory statement in itself because in previous privacy terminologies, opt-in means I explicitly opt in. And opt-out means I have to explicitly opt out, right?
Right.
And in this case, they're saying opt-in by default. Well, what does that mean?
You are opted in
by
default.
I actually don't think that's what it means. No? I think what they mean is it will be opt-in by default, but in certain cases it will be opt-out. And a case that I could see is for an enterprisely managed system.
Okay.
The enterprise could say you're opt-out. I don't know that I'm right, but that's how I read that, was that it is opt-in by default, which means exactly what you think, Scott, that the person has to opt in to get it.
Okay.
But that there will be cases, and I will say a good example of this, and I know this happens with Android, and I believe it now happens with iPhones, but I'm not sure because I haven't had an iPhone since AT&T lost the exclusivity, right?
Yeah, it's been a long time. Yeah.
Right. And that's not why I switched. I'm just saying that's
right.
When I had an iPhone, AT&T was the only place you could get them.
Yeah.
Now I think it's the same as Android, where the provider of the phone is able to set certain settings when they deliver it. And so I could see an exception where like Verizon decides that if you buy an iPhone from them, they're going to double down on the AI and you would have to opt out. That's what I think it means.
Yeah. If that's true, then I'm happier about it because I thought it was saying that people would be opted in by default, which is opposite. Yeah.
And I agree with you. That's totally not the meaning of that. So I hope that's not what they mean.
Yeah. Anyways. Well, it'll be interesting to see how they maintain privacy while enabling a lot of personalization. If it works, though, as we said, it'll strengthen Apple's image, I think, around being more privacy-focused than Google and other tech companies. So, speaking of AI and privacy, did you know that ClickArmor has employee training for security risks from artificial intelligence? And several flavors of privacy guidance, including HIPAA, GDPR, and PIPEDA, which is the Canadian policy government right regulation. So don't forget that ClickArmor can provide you with faster employee completion of training in all areas you need compliance in, and better knowledge retention in your human risk management program. So please visit clickarmor.ca and book a demo call today.
And that's it for Aware Much. We're supposed to sing a duet, Scott.
Oh, that's right. We did last
week.
We did a jingle.
We did it together. Aware Much.
Didn't sound as good this time.
Kevin's just like, this is terrible. Yeah, I have to end this podcast. Well, I think that's a good time to end the podcast so Kevin can go burn the NSO Group down and set them all on fire and nuke them. I mean, the fact that you have nuclear weapons is pretty scary. So.
Well, you know, Second Amendment.
Oh, true. Fair enough. All right. Well, thanks everyone for listening. Until next time, stay safe, stay secure, and stay private. Thanks for watching or listening to this episode. Be sure to subscribe wherever you like to listen to podcasts, follow us on X @SharedSec, and help support the podcast by joining our Patreon to get ad-free episodes, bonus content, and many more exclusive supporter-only benefits. Visit sharedsecurity.net/supporter for more details.